Good evening, Wisconsin. uh, oh gosh, you can do better than that. I know you can do better than that because we're going to have a little countdown. Put an on in front of it. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, on. Wisconsin. There you go. I don't have any problem when I get audiences do "Hail to the Victors" when I'm in Ann Arbor. So you got to beat that, don't you? Okay. Well, what if I told you? And please remember, this is an imaginary situation I'm going to talk about next. But what if I told you in an imaginary, hypothetical, pretend manner that there's a bomb? No, wait, there's a nuclear warhead, that's it. There's a nuclear warhead located in this room right now, set to go off in, let's say, an hour from now. Okay, now don't get up and leave just yet. No, because in this hypothetical situation, you can't get out. The doors are all locked. You're all stuck here. Okay, but I happen to know where this nuclear warhead's located. I also happen to know how to defuse it, but it'll take everyone's effort together to do so. And then it becomes quite easy. You think if I told just a few people in the audience about this nuclear warhead and how to defuse it, that you could help me spread the word about this imminent threat to everyone else in the room before it goes off? So we could solve the problem. We could defuse the bomb before the hour's up, right? Of course we could. If I knew where it was, I knew how to defuse it. I told a couple of people, you help me spread the word, done, right? So how many here would want to help me do that? Spread the word, defuse the bomb, of course. Who didn't raise their hand? All right. In reality, there's a serious threat to our existence as we speak. But instead of being confined just to this one theater room, this real-life threat affects our entire planet, and it affects all species on it. And just like the doors being locked in this room, we're all stuck here on this once and still can be beautiful planet. We can't get out. Instead of the all-or-none example of the bomb exploding, though, this real-life threat occurs over a period of time, sort of like a cancerous bomb, going off a little here and a little there until maybe one final mega explosion. Much like the bomb example in this room that I presented, we're in control of the outcome if we do the right thing. Spread awareness, act together, quickly enough, and in the right manner. We have a little more than an hour to solve this problem together, figuratively and literally, but not much more than a couple of years. That's it. Now, the bomb I'm talking about in real life is the effect we have on our planet caused by our choice to eat animals. Something quite simple to solve, it seems, but oh my goodness, just so difficult to believe. And then, even more difficult to do something about. I mean, trust me, I've spent 40 years doing this. Now, it underscores the most pressing issue we have as a society. Now, if you think that's an overly dramatic statement, I'm sure a few do, and if you do, then that becomes part of the problem. So let's see what I mean by all this. Many of the choices that we make in life will have a profound impact on something else in the world. This is especially true with things we consume, like food. It's one of the major disconnects we seem to have. What you do here might affect something over there, and how to start looking outside of the microcosm or the bubble that each of us tends to live in, and how to perhaps encourage others to do the same. How does your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, for instance, what you choose to eat today, have anything at all to do with a shaman from the Amazon area, or one of the 2 billion people in the world without water, or the imminent extinction of a number of species on Earth, or the plight of this starving child in Ethiopia, or even the taxes that I have to pay, or should pay this year to our government? What possibly could you and the food you choose to eat have anything to do with these things, and why should you care? And how is all this related to some bomb going off? Well, I stopped eating animals nearly 40 years ago when I was in graduate school, primarily from a health and environment standpoint, but also because of the animal research I was involved with at that time, which I still do. But now it's more of this type of animal research, perhaps in a jungle, a remote area, getting a better grasp on what sustainability really does in fact mean. So that would have to include researching animals like these at some of the largest dairy operations in the world and some of the smallest, and these grass-fed and pastured livestock operations here in the U.S. and in many countries overseas. This happens to be in the U.K. That guy really likes me. I mean, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the cow down there. And I've researched quite a few farms like these. We certainly can't leave fish out of the equation now, can we? Now, we're going to examine the word sustainable pretty carefully because it's frequently misused. And recently it's been morphed into so many different meanings to suit so many different needs, and it's the latest buzz. I mean, you see this word everywhere. For most people, it refers to our energy sector. How many miles per gallon of gas your car can achieve, how many energy-efficient light bulbs you can switch out to save electricity, which is a great thing. Also to waste, how, what, and when to recycle, and sometimes we think about economic or social sustainability, but rarely is food choice connected to sustainability efforts in a proper way, especially the raising and eating of animals despite its enormous effect. It's simply too challenging for everyone, culturally, socially, politically. Well, I call all this global depletion, the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health. It's still sustainability. I think we just need to hear it from a different direction, and we need to hear the whole story through an unfiltered lens. How many here are familiar with the work of Jamie Oliver or Mark Bittman or, of course, Michael Pollan? Yeah, sure. The industrialization of foods, high fructose corn syrup, eating less meat, important, yeah? But these are just fragments of the picture. We need to understand the entire picture, the sustainability of our planet, our resources, and ourselves. And to do this, we always need to include topics such as loss of biodiversity, world hunger, sustainability of our own health, water scarcity, agricultural land use inefficiencies, the state of our oceans and fish, climate change. These are all connected by food choice. And they're all involved in this bomb that's ticking away, gradually going off all around us. Well, the story for me always begins with these two numbers. There are a little over 7.2 billion people living on our planet today, 240,000 new ones added every single day. So control the growth of our population is certainly an issue. Can't deny that, but it's not nearly the problem as the number on the right, what we're doing to the planet. The number on the right represents the fact that there are more than 70 billion animals living on our planet that we raise and eat for food each year, and that repeats itself year after year in growing numbers, and that's the problem. In fact, this 70 billion number is quite impossible to pin down, and it's very much on the light side because on any given day, you may find up to 1.7 trillion chickens in the world, or 1 to 2 trillion fish in the world on their way, sooner or later, going off to slaughter that year. Let's look at a graphic about global depletion. Certainly there are other industries that contribute to this picture, but none have a comprehensive impact. Now, just how serious is this depletion? Vary. In some cases, it's irreversible, and it's spiraling downward quickly. That's the cancerous bomb. All of these systems that you see are affected. Simply put, we're in overshoot mode. We're demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. It would take 1.5 to 2 full Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet, and most of this is due to our choice to eat animals. It's serious enough on its own merit, but it's made much more so because of all the layers of various influences that tend to bury the problem and then bury its solutions. We just don't want to deal with it. And we can put every other major problem in the world at the top of the list to fix, except for this one. And yet, this is the world. Now, what's critical for everyone to understand is that this is not just a factory farm issue. Not at all. It's a raising animals to eat issue. And we're going to see that as we go along tonight. Well, we humans have reached a critical and fragile point in our evolutionary journey as a species. Just in the last 100 years, just a blink of an eye in terms of time, we've reached the Anthropocene era, where we've acquired the power to positively, but mostly negatively, affect our biosphere, the litho and hydro and atmosphere, the very environs that sustain us and sustains all other life on Earth. Unfortunately, we haven't acquired the wisdom or the maturity to be able to manage this power in a sensible or a beneficial manner. We're essentially in the adolescent phase of our place in the big history. And we've reached a bottleneck of sorts, one that many experts predict that we may not be able to work our way through as a species. But there is a way. Let's refine our thoughts on global warming or climate change. First, we need to remember that global warming is really just one component of the much larger, more profound problem of global depletion, the more total effect we have on our planet. And the most important thing anyone can do about global warming or global depletion is take a good look at what's on their plate. Specifically, all foods derived from fish, livestock, and yes, that has to include dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt, and eggs, all part of the problem. And we'll come back to that. This widely cited study was shocking when it first appeared. How could the meat everyone's eating cause more greenhouse gas emissions than all the cars, trucks, planes, and trains that we drive and fly every day? I mean, it was hardly believable. But instead of the 18%, as the original 2006 United Nations report stated, or even 14.5% that they've downgraded to this last October. A number of researchers have found recently that livestock can produce, I mean, it's possible, that they could produce as much as 51% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions found in our atmosphere, mostly created by the respiratory carbon dioxide and land use changes that they didn't account for at all in that first or second report, and the methane production by these billions of animals themselves, not due to confinement or as a byproduct of factory farming methods. Most researchers now agree that this is minimally 30%. Now, this is also, try to remember, it's without factoring in any greenhouse gases emitted because of our demand to eat fish, the fuel, refrigeration, processing, packaging, transportation, etc. Now, regardless of where this exact number resides, somewhere between 30 and 51%, it's not 18. It's certainly not 14.5, and it may ultimately be our demise as we fumble around and fumble our way through blaming fossil fuels, which are important. A perfect example of how this information is suppressed occurs every single year during our climate change conference, held originally in Kyoto with its 1997 Kyoto Protocol. Most recently, it was in November in Warsaw, where countries have come together and they're trying to solve this global warming problem, at least on paper, but none of this is being addressed. In fact, it's now being postponed. They just can't deal with it. Nothing was really accomplished at Warsaw recently, no binding legal commitments consistent with previous conferences. We had a number of large organizations just walking out. And it's primarily because the two largest emitters in the world, China and the US, don't participate. They're not active participants. And the 200 countries in attendance, well, they can't agree on anything. So now the attention is turning to how we can all adapt to climate change, since it appears to be inevitable to them, rather than putting forth the effort to mitigate it. Just like the bomb example I gave in this room, every aspect of global depletion has a timeline. It's not really a question of if we're going to run out of something, it's when. The most critical timeline of all, I think, is that of climate change. We only have a 3-year window of time from now to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or we're going to see irreversible warming of our planet. Most experts agree that if our planet's temperature increases just 2 degrees centigrade from previous historic levels, we're going to see catastrophic effects. Complete loss of island countries from rising seas, severe droughts, flooding, storms. Some of that sound familiar? Yeah, well, that's because we're more than halfway there to that 2 centigrade mark. In fact, the International Energy Agency has been quite clear about this window of opportunity for us to limit global warming, and that window closes at the end of year 2017. We'll never get it back. It sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? I mean, something everyone should be aware of and concerned about. But what does this have to do with food? What's this guy talking about? Well, that's a good question, because we all believe that climate change is caused by the energy sector, right? Electricity, burning fossil fuels, especially coal. And that belief begins with Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it carries right on through articles such as this one by Bill McKibben, where he blames Shell Oil and BP and Exxon for climate change. They're the culprits. Well, they certainly have something to do with it, but whether it's with winning a Nobel Peace Prize, or at an annual global climate change conference, or with prominent publications, those with a platform have failed to mention or properly position the role of eating animals despite its incredible contribution of minimally a third of the problem. So to summarize the connection between food choice and climate change, we have this. Climate change is very real. It's worsening. The situation is urgent. Greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, anthropogenic, significantly affect climate change. Raising animals for us to eat is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, as large or nearly as large as the energy sector. And lastly, any food movement away from factory farms, but including grass-fed or pastured systems, animal systems, will not solve the problem. In fact, it's going to make it worse. More land use changes, more deforestation, more production of methane, 40 to 60% more methane produced per one grass-fed cow as compared to grain-fed. Given the predictions of nearly every climate scientist in the world, our business-as-usual approach to climate change isn't going to work. Ask any of them. So it's time to get outside the box, take the right action, and to do it now. So what do I mean by the right action? Looking at solutions, at prescriptions, I think this is what we have. The first approach to climate change is the no-worries approach. That's what my dad thinks. Richard, you don't know what you're talking about. It's because it's not real. And of course, the other approach is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, right? Renewables. Go to renewables, just like McKibben and Al Gore and everyone else recommends. But renewable energy infrastructure, such as building solar and wind generators all over our country or all over the world to reduce climate change, that's a good idea. But it's projected to take at least 20 more years and $18 trillion to develop. Well, we don't have 20 years. And we certainly don't have $18 trillion. So another solution to climate change would be we could stop eating animals today. It doesn't have to take 20 years. And instead of $18 trillion, it costs nothing. That's the prescription to mitigate, not adapt to down the road when it's too late, but to mitigate climate change. Well, interspersed throughout our discussions, you're going to hear and see a few themes, many themes. One theme is how information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged. So much so that objectives of many important meetings like the climate change conferences that we talked about and other organizations, well, those objectives aren't being met. And that all begins with the words we use. How clear are they? Are they conveying reality? These are all food movements that superficially seem to make sense, right? Yeah, they make you feel as if you're going away, you're going in the right direction anyway, because they're going away from factory farms. They're going away from processed foods. Well, that's got to be a good thing, right? Maybe. Maybe not. Do any of these words mean sustainable? Do any of them mean healthy? Many would want you to think so. How about the word humane? Does humane equal sustainable? And if it does, which it doesn't, who is it that tries to define humane for all of us? Incredibly, there's one person alive today that the USDA and every humane certified organization in the world relies on for that definition of humane. One person. Does humane even equal humane? Well, this statement was taken, I plucked it from the food service section of the sustainability policy at UC Berkeley. Their definition of humane raised, as you can see, is sustainable. It's one and the same. Imagine that. And also, take a closer look at their logo across the top. It's pretty telling that their one snapshot depiction of sustainability is with energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Well, that being the case, all of you know now that half of those wind generators, or a third of those wind generators, should be replaced by the words no livestock. Shouldn't they? Yeah, that would be a little bit more accurate for UC Berkeley, wouldn't it? And what does real food mean? I mean, I have issues with its precepts. Real food is a very large food movement today, getting larger and larger on college campuses that I'm visiting. And it's defined by being local, fair, sustainable, and humane. All four. Well, that sounds terrific. So I brought two types of food items with me that I thought I'd show you. One's considered not real food. It's not real food at all. It's this Vega bar because it's not local. That's why it's not real food. It's made in Vancouver. Oh, that's terrible. And worse, it's processed. It's all put together for you. But it does have sachi inchi seeds, organic, fair trade. 4 different types of organic plant protein. It's really put together quite beautifully well. But remember, it's not real food. It doesn't fit their definition. Whereas this other food item I brought with me is considered real food. I couldn't get myself around to bringing the other food item. It's this. Over 18,000 chickens are killed every minute. Every 60 seconds in our country. 18,000. I suppose that's pretty real. And that's real food, I guess, huh? And if chicken, beef, pork, or any animal products considered real food, what about these? Huh? Real food too? Sure, why not? I mean, they come along with it, and they're free. You don't have to pay anything for those. So unlike the Vega bar, this poor thing is considered real food because it's local. And the real food people think it's sustainable, and they think it's healthy, and it's humane, but it's not. It's none of those things other than being local. So therefore, the real food movement is flawed, isn't it? Because the definitions they're using are flawed. Similar to every other food movement on this group, in this list. Just because something is local doesn't at all mean that it's healthy or sustainable or humane. It doesn't even mean that it should be eaten, really. The only thing local means is that it's not very far from here. Now, we're going to come back to this because there's an important part to local we're going to touch on. Again, it all begins with the words we use, though. Are they conveying reality? This represents a food term that's constantly used improperly. I'm sure Dr. Fullen here has his ears full of this. What is this? It's It's a protein. Perhaps a rudimentary protein. It doesn't have the secondary and tertiary characteristics, but it's a protein. So when you're thinking about eating protein, this is what you should be thinking about, isn't it? I need to get my protein today. Protein is not the little buddy looking over my shoulder here. That's my research assistant. Seems pretty obvious. And what about this group therapy session? None of these guys want to be called protein. It's most likely why they're in group therapy. Protein's also not the guy on the left here, and yet that's what people are calling protein. The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva that he always has, I mean, he's a cow. He shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right, and yet we do. In fact, his name is Plato. And what about this phrase? 15 million people heard Ted Danson proclaim his love of fish on Earth Day last year and every other day since 1987, and yet he eats them for all those years. Now, no offense to Mr. Danson, please. We don't want to do that. And maybe things have changed recently, but for him and 98% of all other individuals in the world, this phrase, I love fish, actually means this. I love to eat fish, doesn't it? That's what it really means. If he loved fish, as in loving his cat or his dog, he certainly wouldn't kill and eat them, would he? I don't think so. Again, it's how we use our words, isn't it? In fact, Oceana's Objectives is one of the most influential conservation organizations in the world. Their objectives were made very clear last year in an interview where their spokesperson, Mr. Danson, stated, it's not about saving the fish. It's about saving the fishermen. And that explains a bit. Now, there are three principal ways our oceans are being destroyed, and all three are caused or at least heavily affected by our food choice. Raising and eating animals on land causes warming and acidification of our oceans, which are just trying to protect us. 90% of the excess heat added to Earth's climate since the 1960s has been stored in our oceans, which is triggering extreme weather events and killing sea life. More than 50% of all excessive greenhouse gas emissions have been absorbed by our oceans, which has dropped pH levels by 30%, making it more difficult for certain species to survive. Surface runoff from livestock operations on land has caused more than 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world, comprising 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of oxygen or life. So any meaningful discussion of the state of our oceans has to first begin with frank discussions about land-based animal agriculture. But it is fishing. It is fishing that has the largest impact of all. Incredibly large amounts of sea life are taken from our oceans in three ways. First, they're taken as target fish. You know, that's the one you want to eat. Fish are also taken out of our oceans to feed other fish, grown on factory fish farms, part of the aquaculture movement. And lastly, fish are also taken as bykill, due to the other two types of fishing. Well, that doesn't leave too much in our oceans now, does it? In fact, our oceans are being ravaged. Now, who here doesn't know that our oceans are being ravaged? Okay, good. Well, if everyone knows this, why does everyone we know still eat fish? Fragile, interdependent, and very poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. Over 90 million tons of fish were caught just last year, with quite a few more millions of tons of bykill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught and killed and discarded in the process of trying to catch that targeted fish everyone's asking for. Bykill includes juvenile fish, all 7 of the endangered sea turtles, sea lions, birds, dolphins, even whales. I mean, come on. Is that really worth it? I mean, this is embarrassing. Of the 17 major recognized fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either overexploited or on the verge of collapse. 85% of all the world's fish species are affected in some way, considered heavily depleted, many, from overfishing practices. Well, that's quite a bit of damage. But along comes this word, sustainable, to justify continued harvesting. Well, we can just stamp that word on anything and continue in the take mode, and we can feel good about it. Why? Well, because it's sustainable. That's why. Now, how is this word even used in the fishing industry? Who defines it? Who monitors it? And with less than 1%, less than 1% of all of our oceans being regulated, then who decides on enforcement? If you look at this carefully, then, the real answer is no one. And I say real answer because now there's sea life caught and labeled sustainable when in fact it's not. but it's still labeled as such by a number of highly respected organizations, such as the Marine Stewardship Council, or MSC. And there are many, many examples of this: tuna, cod, pollock, haddock, salmon, krill, menhaden, hake. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, highly respected organization, has lobster from the Gulf of Maine, both U.S. and Canada waters, listed as a good alternative. They've had it listed as a good alternative for years. It never has been. It's not a good alternative for many reasons: rapidly declining number of lobster in that region, inefficient trapping mechanisms, and most importantly is the very sad effect lobster trapping has on the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. There are only 400 of these magnificent creatures left that we haven't killed. And nearly all of them, nearly 80% of them, are getting entangled, injured, and killed in those darn trap lines. We owe these whales and these lobsters much more than this. Look closely, please. This young female North Atlantic right whale died shortly after this photograph was taken, found on a beach in Florida, essentially tortured, towing these lobster trap lines desperately along her migration route of over 2,000 miles from Canada, where she originally became entangled on her fins, on her body, on her tail, in her mouth, around her head. I mean, what a struggle this must have been for her. And this is not an isolated incident. It happens all the time, which is why I'm showing it to you. So eating lobster, you must ask, eating lobster is sustainable for whom? Elsewhere in the world, there have been an estimated 500 miles of non-biodegradable fishing nets cut loose from fishing vessels each year for the past 25 years, catching countless numbers of unsuspecting sea life, essentially becoming depots of coagulated dead marine animals. You know, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is aptly named because that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching all this happen while we're trusting them, and then they're promoting it to be continued. Each year, more than 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises are killed in fishing gear. This is one of the many prices that we all pay for someone at your table or someone at my table eating fish that's labeled as sustainable. And so it is with fishing under the sustainable label. Target fish are becoming extinct. We move on to the next fish in line, creating serial depletion, and then other sea life up and down the food web are becoming extinct, all part of the collateral damage that begins with us. And what is this? Well, don't ask me. I only know a few things about it because the world's leading scientists don't know much about it. But that didn't stop it from becoming certified as sustainable. Now, how does that happen? How does something that becomes sustainable when you don't know anything about it? Only we could do that. This is the Ross Sea toothfish. More than 5,000 tons are now caught per year. Many more thousands of tons are caught illegally, and yet no one knows where they breed or spawn. And as of a year ago, no one had even seen a young toothfish. And bluefin tuna represent, I think, all that we're doing wrong with our oceans. A little over a year ago, we had a great opportunity, but the ruling was made to not grant an endangered status to them, even though their numbers had dropped by 95%. They're already extinct in the Black and Caspian Seas. Instead of eating dolphin-free tuna, we should be concerned about simply eating tuna-free. This is an approved sustainable method of catching tuna. Coral reef systems around the world are in serious trouble. The Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral cover since 1985. Most would think it's due to pollution and climate change, which has their part. But the primary cause of coral reef death throughout the entire Caribbean region and most of the rest of the world is not pollution. And it's not yet from climate change. It's from overfishing. An example in the other direction can be found in the Queens Islands, off the southern coast of Cuba. They have not allowed any commercial fishing. Their coral reef systems, ecosystems today, look the same as they have for the past thousands of years. One of the most important factors in balancing coral reef systems are predatory fish, or apex feeders, like sharks. But we're killing them too. Quite a few of them. 1/3 of all shark species are nearing extinction. We're killing nearly 100 million sharks per year. Why? Well, 40 million sharks have their fins cut off like this, and then they're thrown overboard to die, so we can eat shark fin soup. It's terrible to see this, isn't it? But I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourselves, I don't eat shark fin soup. Nope, not me. And furthermore, it's banned in 8 states in our country. Well, isn't that great? But again, over 98% of us do eat fish. And by eating fish, any type of fish, we're doing this to 60 million sharks that are caught each year and killed in fishing nets and fishing lines as bykill. So go ahead and ban shark fin soup all you want, but why would you stop there? If you're truly concerned about sharks, you should ban fishing. Killing krill has become a big business, but you don't need to eat krill to get your omega-3s. You don't need to eat any animal to get your omega-3s unless you listen to Dr. Oz. However, krill is fundamental to the survival of nearly every animal species in and around the Antarctic. Krill numbers have dropped by 78% since 1980, affecting the decline of a number of penguin species and making it very difficult for baleen whales such as blue, right, and fin to try to make a comeback. A large pod of pilot whales, 22 of them, beached themselves in the Florida Keys a few months ago. The cause of death was most likely malnutrition, since it was found they had no food in their stomachs. These whales eat mackerel, herring, and lots of squid, all of which we fish to an overexploited state. There are hardly any left. This is a perfect example of the cascading effect that we have on other life as we continue to eat sea animals, taking away the food supply from other species that actually do need to eat squid. The most heavily killed fish species in the world is the Alaskan pollock, harvested at a rate of 3 million tons per year, and yet it's still labeled as sustainable. Now, really, who would think you could take 3 million tons of any species from anywhere on Earth and then think they wouldn't be missed? Here's the point regarding our oceans. It's no longer a problem of overfishing. That was back in the 1800s, mid-1800s. Now it's about fishing. Whole Foods, Walmart, Wegmans have all pledged to phase out Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, red-listed seafood. But at the end of the day, though, it's not really about a pledge from big business. It's about how accurately the word sustainable is being defined first and then used. Well, no worries, because now we have fish farms. 49% of all the fish worldwide are produced from aquaculture, which is growing faster than any other food sector. One reason for this tremendous growth is a very false illusion of environmentalism. Asia now produces 91% of all farm fish in the world. Shrimp, tilapia, carp, with the vast majority of operations being unregulated. Well, here we have another interesting idea where fish are caught in our already ravaged oceans to feed other fish, produced on factory fish farms, sometimes at a ratio of 20-1, in the form of fish, fish meal, fish oil. 88% of all fish oil produced in the world now, today, is given to these fish farms. Very soon, we're going to run out of fish in our oceans. We're going to run out of land to raise livestock, so we're going to be turning to this, a more closed-loop system of aquaculture called aquaponics, a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics that grows both fish and plants. Businesses are already snatching up abandoned industrial warehouses in many urban settings. This happens to be in Chicago. Raising fish in tanks, growing vegetables with the wastewater, and then cycling it back to fish. But they all use massive amounts of electricity. They use massive amounts of feed inputs, and these are basically adulterated forms of plant-based hydroponics or aeroponics. And regardless of where the fish on your plate or anybody's plate comes from, now or in the future, is the process of catching or extracting and slaughtering fish, is that process humane? And the reason I'm asking that is because if it isn't, then why do we do it? Does anyone know what nociceptors are, especially polymodal nociceptors? Well, they're sensory receptors associated with feeling pain. You all have them. That's how you feel pain, in many ways. Most mammals have numerous polymodal nociceptors in and around their face, their head, their neck. So do fish. Last year, Cornell became the first Ivy League school to be MSC certified sustainable. It's quite a distinct honor, I think, wouldn't you say? That's right. Cornell has now joined other distinguished health-conscious organizations, such as McDonald's, which was the first fast food chain to be MSC certified. Both examples of just how far away we are with definitions and terms and steps towards true sustainability. All researchers that are unbiased economically or politically will tell you there's very little we actually understand about our oceans, that there's an infinite line of connection, a complex web of intertwining life and ecosystems supported by our oceans. It's infinite. So has the fishing industry accounted for and then devised a calculation of this infinity? That's not what I learned about infinity. In reality, there's no such thing as sustainable commercial fishing. With continued warming, acidification, and deoxygenation, our oceans that we once felt were so robust will very soon be unable to support what few life forms remain in and around them. So the timelines for our oceans look like this. And this is not science fiction. It's not something I just made up on the way up here from Chicago. It's reality. And quite sadly, this has all happened on our watch. You're looking at what we've created and then are passing on to future generations. So the magic pill to heal our sick oceans is not magic at all. It's really quite simple. Just leave them alone. Our rainforests are still being lost. 25 million acres just last year by a combination of deforestation and degradation. An area of tropical rainforest the size of a football field is destroyed every second. That's tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like, because the world's food priorities are with eating and raising and eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the sad result, the burning and bulldozing of rainforests. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle typically follow this in. Usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the US or anywhere else, you're supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. Brazil announced a year ago that deforestation in their country hit a 24-year low. Well, what does that really mean? Because they still cut down 2,000 square miles of rainforest during that one-year period of time, just in Brazil. And tropical deforestation rates are increasing in Bolivia, Peru, Malaysia, and numerous other countries in the world, including Brazil again. 80% of all rainforest loss, 80% in the Amazon area is due to raising cattle, with another 10% lost due to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. And remember, these livestock are grazing. This is not a matter of factory farming. We've already lost numerous ancient tribes, over 90 of them, shaman, undiscovered medicinal plants, and millions of living things. We'll never see them again. They shouldn't be lost because of our inappropriate choice of foods. By the year 2050, most rainforests will be gone, and the few patches that remain will have already been way past their tipping point. This, of course, means that all the millions of species that originally lived in these rainforests will be gone, the once abundant water systems destroyed, and, of course, their oxygenation and climate regulatory mechanisms will be lost for the next few millions of years, which is how long it took these rainforests to develop properly. And we've wiped them out in less than 50 years. It's quite easy to quantify our global depletion of land, then, with far too much of it being used for the wrong purpose. I mean, you see this just about everywhere you go. This is how much land is being used to raise livestock, 45% of the entire land mass on Earth. Now, how accurate is this ridiculous figure? Well, it was documented by the International Livestock Research Institute. So most likely this 45% figure was underestimated. In the US alone, nearly 78% of all land used for agriculture, 78%, is used in some way to support the animals we eat. But listen to this. There are 90 million cattle in the US today, 70 million pigs. Only 3% of those are being pastured, only 1% of livestock in general, and yet we're still using this much land. And if we factor in public lands for grazing, livestock account for 97% of all land used for agriculture in our country. The reason is because it's so inefficient. You can produce 15 times more protein from plants as you can from meat on any given area of land. You can produce anywhere from 5,000 to 45,000 pounds of plant foods on 1 acre of land versus 480 on average. 480 pounds at best, and that's at stretching at best, of meat or animal products on 1 acre, regardless of what Joel Salatin and the polyphase farm proponents will tell you. It's shocking. And these are averages all over the world where I've been. It's shocking knowing how much land on Earth is used for raising animals, how terribly inefficient this really is. There are nearly 1 billion people suffering from hunger. This year alone, 6 million children will die from starvation. Well, how does this relate? 82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food is fed to animals that are then killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries like the US, UK, and Europe. 1/4 of all grain produced by third world countries today is now given to livestock, in their country or out. Now, to be sure, world hunger has many layers of complexity. One of the larger reasons is tied to poverty, as we all know. But another significant factor is the looming shadow of our current demand to eat livestock and fish, which is indirectly tied to poverty. In fact, eating these animals ultimately affects food prices. It sure does. It affects food availability. It clearly affects policymaking, and it even suppresses education when we're trying to improve agricultural systems in developing countries. In 2013, there was a record harvest of grain in the world, over 3 billion tons. 3 billion tons. But half of that was fed to animals in the meat and dairy industries. 77% of all coarse grains produced in the world goes to livestock. We can't blame climate change. We can't blame droughts or flooding for the world's food security issues. Most of the food's going to the wrong place. Now, solving hunger, or world hunger, is not as easy, though, as simply giving them the grain that would normally go to livestock. That's always been an argument. Solving hunger in developing countries, I think, demands a multi-dimensional approach to sustainability, establishing on many levels simultaneously, with organic, whole, plant-based food systems at the nucleus. The model for success at reducing hunger in developing countries, I believe, should look like this. There are 2 million nonprofit organizations in the world, 1 million of them conducting humanitarian efforts. So we're not lacking good people who want to do good deeds. And care packages of food are necessary as a short-term acute patch. But all that's not going to solve world hunger. They don't need more handouts. These people need the tools to create sustainability for themselves long-term and through many layers. More than 80% of the population in most developing countries, especially in Africa, are rural subsistence farmers living in poverty and illiteracy. So these are the layers of sustainability that can be achieved for them, all centered around a purely plant-based, soil rebuilding, climate change resilient system. Therefore, no livestock. So we're losing other species on Earth at an unprecedented rate. With such a loss of biodiversity, plants, insects, animals, that we're finding ourselves in another era of large-scale extinction. The current view of most scientists is more related to the rate of extinction rather than the exact number. It's too difficult for them to pin down. That we're losing anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times the background rate, that which we've seen consistently for the previous several thousands of years, which used to be around 2 to 4 species going extinct per year. Now, regardless of the metric, it's a massive amount. So why all the extinctions? Why are all these species becoming extinct, and what are we doing about it? Nearly all concerned researchers agree that the primary cause, more than 50%, the primary cause of the rapid biodiversity loss we're witnessing on our planet today is by pastured and grazing livestock operations on land, loss of habitat, and by unsustainable fishing practices in our oceans, loss of habitat. There are only 300 Mediterranean monk seals left in the world. What we are doing to other forms of life on Earth is unparalleled in the history of our planet, where one species, us, is causing the mass extinction of nearly all other species. It reminds me of this somewhat well-known and very appropriate comment that if all insects on Earth disappeared, within 50 years, all life on Earth would end. However, if all human beings disappeared from Earth, within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish. Yeah. One of the most pressing concerns we have today regarding sustaining our life and future life on Earth, aside from climate change, is our supply of fresh water. We don't have much and we're using all of it. Now, sure, it's a regional issue, but aquifers and wells are already drying up. There's a growing gap between worldwide demand for water and what's really available. With so much demand, there's expected to be a 40% shortage in water supply in just the next 15 years. What you decide to eat has every single thing to do with this, globally. Scientists are very concerned about water scarcity, but I think it's really more a matter of water management, isn't it? Instead of focusing on technologies, we should be first looking at choices. Is this a good choice? How about this choice? Is that a good choice? How about any of these? Are any of these good choices? As compared to, say, these average choices for the same area, same regional area in the world. Do you know that it requires in general, it requires more than 400 gallons of water just to slaughter one cow or one pig, grass-fed or not? In addition to these other figures, for the act itself, when we slaughtered 145 million cows and pigs last year, just in the U.S. Much of our fresh water is not fully renewable in our lifetime, and it's certainly not infinite in quantity. Although water on Earth remains constant, the consumptive form it happens to be in does not. 4 out of 5 people now live within 30 miles of a water-damaged area, meaning soon to run out or polluted. There are nearly 300 transboundary river and waterways on Earth where multiple countries share vital running water supply. As we see water shortages over the next 15 years, we will surely see droughts, famine, human sickness, and then we're going to see conflicts, social unrest, and even wars. Indeed, those living downstream will be fiercely battling those living upstream for their water rights. Climate change will make these matters worse, but not cause them. Food choice and virtual water trading through food, especially water-intensive animal products, which all of them are, will play a much larger role than energy and fossil fuel use. The average household in our country uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year, according to the EPA. Indoor use, about the same outdoors. That's quite a bit of water. And it's what we're focused on in times of drought, how to reduce this. Well, the average person in our country consumes 206 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 46 pounds of pig and 58 pounds of cow and 102 pounds of chicken and turkey, in addition to the 248 eggs and 616 pounds of dairy products, which equates to 405,000 gallons of water per person per year just to support that animal product diet. So now, a more accurate view that the EPA should be aware of and projecting is that every household of 3 people in the US, will they use over 1 million gallons of water, not 50,000. 1.2 million gallons of water, and 96% of that outrageous water use is from their choice to eat animals. So whenever there's a drought or water shortage anywhere in our country, which there are and will be, does our government or communities ever step up and declare a state of rationing or eliminating meat or dairy? Why not? Why shouldn't they? So then these are the timelines for fresh water, and it's not anything we can feel comfortable with. Over 90% of the world chooses food that's unhealthy for them and for our planet. It's a matter of taste, isn't it? Alex and I were talking about this earlier. And there are many reasons why. All are significant, but most overwhelming is the powerful combination of cultural and political interactions. We begin solving this with a massive and swift education campaign, and we need to reverse the trend of tiptoeing around this subject by the media and other authors and educators and many of the new food movements where we get most of our information from. You know, I mentioned earlier that buying local has little to do with sustainability, other than from an economic standpoint. It's a very solid idea, rock solid, to help nearby farmers, and that's important. But in fact, transportation is only responsible for 4%. 4% of all the fossil fuels used and all the greenhouse gases emitted in the entire food production process. It's much more relevant to view this a different way, the cradle-to-grave assessment. Instead of greenhouse gases, which are important, what are all the detrimental effects to get these items to our plate? Well, to calculate that, you've got to go back to where these food items begin. You've got to go back to their origins. Using a life cycle analysis, you see very quickly, instantaneously, that eating non-local plant-based foods have minimal sustainability concerns versus eating animal products produced by your next-door neighbor that contribute these percentages to the many aspects of global depletion. It's the type of food that matters. It's not how many miles it travels. So by all means, please do support your local farmer markets and cooperatives. I do. That's all I eat. But it has to be plant-based or it won't be sustainable. We're not going to kid ourselves. And it's so important to know this. Local is great. This is the equation. Local, organic, plant-based. That's the equation. A large part of our solution process will be these agricultural systems. I mean, community-supported agriculture, farm-to-table, small and local farms, real food, slow food, organic, biodynamic, traceable, urban agriculture, all are great. They all make sense if they don't involve animals. Eventually, the wealth of any nation will be redefined in terms of natural resources and strength of its sustainable, truly sustainable systems. Our survival will depend soon on how quickly and accurately we begin to define this word, properly define this word sustainable. We'll see sustainability become a growth opportunity and a risk management strategy for businesses, essentially transforming economics. Futurists sit around asking themselves all sorts of things about the future. They ask themselves, what one new idea will change the world drastically in the next century? Well, will it be new nanotechnology? How about transhumanism and robotics? How about traceability within businesses or even renewable energy systems? In terms of ensuring our existence on this planet, that one transforming idea that futurists are asking about is for all humans on Earth to eat only plant-based foods. And then there's our farm bill. I was going to say pitiful, but it was locked up in political disagreement and indecision and then sequestration. I mean, what a tremendous opportunity this was and still is for our country to solve a number of problems we have, ranging from our fiscal cliff, remember that, to our climate change cliff, to our health care crisis cliff, all the same cliff in many ways. It's been frankly difficult for me to watch our policymakers over the last few years spend so much time and our money trying to construct policies based on improper definitions of the phrase healthy food. Many of the major changes that were proposed for this bill are aimed at taking away economic support from factory farms and giving more support to small family farmers, thinking that by itself, that one move is going to produce healthier food. That move is not. Essentially, it's going to be shifting funds from large meat and dairy operations to small meat and dairy operations. Well, sure, that's going to help small family farmers, but that's not going to work. I mean, I'm all for 100% for small family farms, but they have to be truly sustainable food that they're producing. So I have another solution dealing with accountability, which would get us on track much quicker. And it's what I call the eco and health risk tax. You're all familiar with the nutrition fact label, I'm sure. Some of you read this, I hope. This happens to be, some of you can believe and some of you can't. This happens to be ground beef or ground cow, something the average consumer would purchase. And on this label, you see that half the calories are from fat, most of those are from saturated fat, even a gram of trans fat, and quite a bit of cholesterol. Now, that all really isn't so good for you. But you don't see not so good anywhere on the label, do you? I don't. And it also has quite a bit of protein, but it's of the type of protein that's implicated in a number of disease states. And you certainly don't see what resources it took to produce what's inside that package. Well, consumers need to know this. So we introduced the eco and health risk factors. And in the event these numbers are a little too complicated, we simply do this. We put a little notation on the bag. It could say, not so good. It could say, not a good choice. Or in the future, when all this becomes voice activated, a little Siri voice could pop out and slap your hand. and say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Now, this is all a good start, but it's most important to reflect these factors into costs. This isn't a carbon tax. It's not a soda tax, which vastly understates the problem. Therefore, they wouldn't work. It's an eco and health risk tax, something we've never done before. Can't hardly even think about, because true cost to our environment, to our own health, has always been externalized, hasn't it? It's never been directly paid for, with our heads always turned in the other direction. We'll eventually need to develop this top-down taxation approach to our decisions about food. It'll come, as well as a bottom-up grassroots educational approach. Well, this is one of the questions of our future. I think this, as well as aquaculture, it's a topic that's gaining momentum, which I find a natural path for people just wanting so badly to hang on to the false sense of needing versus simply wanting to eat animal products. It's a path of least resistance. I mean, let's face it. Let's look at a couple different ways to answer this question. Well, there you have it. That's one way to answer it. I mean, he thinks so, and so do many others. My thought, though, is that we need to be fully aware of the consequences of our food choices, not partially aware. We need to understand what we're doing to all areas of global depletion. We need to know the magnitude and the urgency of the problem. You know what? This is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem, and we'll come back to that. So let's take a look at another way to answer this question about how sustainable grass-fed livestock really is. And to do this, I think the thing we need to do is to go to the very essence of the whole problem. We give everybody in this room 1 acre of land to grow any food you choose. What would you grow? What should you grow? Well, what all my other college and university lectures, the students know what they want to grow. I don't know what that is, but they say, hey, Dr. Oppenlander, can we grow this? I tell them, sure, it's a great idea. It probably should be the male hemp plant. And remember, we're trying to talk about food here. And on this 1 acre, you could try to raise 1 grass-fed cow, thinking it's fully sustainable, just like that multiple-time New York Times best-selling author is telling everyone. But in most areas of the world, 1 acre is not enough. It's not enough. You're going to need 5, 10, even 20. I found a farm that needed 50 acres to grow 1 cow. So you'll have to borrow some land from somebody, your next door neighbor. You've already lost the game. Might as well forget this game. Or you could not use a cow, could not use any livestock. You could plant something like this on just half the acre. You could plant kale. I mean, I just picked this out. I mean, there's thousands of plants to choose from. Kale's a good choice, though. It provides you with much-needed micronutrients, fiber, over 60 phytonutrients, things that you can't get from any body part on that cow. And when looking at global growing applications, how cool is this? I mean, plants like kale and collard greens actually continue to grow, especially kale, through extremes of temperature from minus 5 degrees in my backyard there through 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I had to explain to some people at some lectures that that's snow. You know, I'm down in Arizona. What's that white stuff? And after you pick the leaves from kale or collard greens, does anybody know what happens? New ones grow back. New ones grow back. They regenerate. I bet your cow can't do that. And on the other half an acre, you could plant quinoa, kamut, buckwheat, amaranth, ancient grain power foods, or potatoes, beans, fruit, other vegetables. So many plants to choose from. So there you have it. If you use your 1 acre or try to use it for a grass-fed livestock, you'd end up with 100 pounds to 400 pounds of a type of food that's then implicated in a number of disease states. And along the way, you produce 5 tons of methane and carbon dioxide. You've used, in some cases, you're going to use 1 to 2 million gallons of water for that one cow. We're not talking about just drinking. We're talking about the water that's tied up in all of its food. Or instead, if you use this acre, this 1 acre of land to grow something like kale and quinoa and this fruit combination, vegetables, you produce 20 to 50,000 pounds of food that's infinitely healthier for you to eat and for our planet to grow. It's literally astounding what you can produce on that 1 acre. I do it myself. I've done this. Over the period of time that it would take to raise your 1 grass-fed cow. It's quite an amazing difference, isn't it? Now imagine extrapolating that model out, or variations thereof, in terms of global use of our resources. And now answer this question. Now answer that question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. That's what I'm asking here before he dismissed me from the farm. No, he didn't. And for those who still think, that eating any animal is sustainable, it's time to introduce this concept, relative sustainability. That'll work. How sustainable is it to raise and eat any animal product in a relative sense as compared to plant-based foods? How can we best use our resources? What foods will have the very least effect on climate change? Which foods best promote our own human health, and which are the most compassionate? That's the way we need to start viewing things, in a relative sense. So for me, it's not really at all about how or even if a certain food item is cooked, regardless how many books he sold. That's ridiculous. I'm much more concerned about where that food item came from, which lives and resources it took to get that food item to our plate, and then what effect it has on us after we eat it. That's what's important, not how something's cooked. Now, isn't this a beautiful countryside scene? Beautiful skies and green grass and rolling hills. This happens to be in the northeast section of Victoria, Australia, where I was researching the ecological effects of their food choices. Very important area to study. And instead of seeing beautiful blue skies and rolling hills and et cetera, I like taking a closer look at things like this. So here's what I see in this photo. I got a little closer, and I see this. I see depletion of land, air, food, water, inefficient use of resources. I also saw something else, which is the main reason I visited this specific area to research. Lock in this view for just a moment. As we advance, all of us in the room are going to just walk down the road a few hundred yards, and this is what we see. This 1,000-year-old forest is what that cattle ranch used to be. And it was the home to numerous insects, plants, animals. There are 3 different types of eucalyptus trees growing here, and one animal in particular that I was looking for, which is now endangered due to destroying its home from inefficient use of the land. It's this little guy. All of his family members were killed. Thousands are each year. He now lives in a small, remote rescue area in that forest, and he represents species everywhere on our planet that are being devastated by cattle and other livestock operations on inefficient land use and fishing operations in our oceans, lack of awareness about food choice and politics. In fact, koalas are predicted to become extinct in the next 20 years by those few researchers who are close to the situation. It's quite sad, and that's what I see in that view, whether it's in Australia or United States or anywhere else in the world. Now, about the Go Meatless on Monday campaign. Okay, if you do this, presuming you're eating meat on most of the other days of the week, if you go meatless on Mondays, you'll be contributing to climate change, pollution, global depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health on only 6 days of the week. Instead of 7. You'll be creating a false justification for your actions on those other 6 days of the week. In other words, please, let's not rest on the laurels of what you're doing right only 1/7 of the time. Baby steps. What are those? It's time we do away with baby steps. And I'll tell you why. Because we're in fact not babies, are we? If you think about it, all of us are quite capable of taking big person steps right now. And our planet and all the animals on it shouldn't have to wait with repeated and ongoing assault until we get this figured out. What does eating less meat really mean? Well, just in the 1 hour I've been speaking here tonight, say from 7 to 8 o'clock, over 8 million animals were slaughtered for us to eat in that 1 hour. 114,000 tons of grain were fed to livestock we're raising. But during that same hour, 684 children in the world have died from starvation. 6,000 acres of tropical rainforest were destroyed and replaced by cattle or crops to feed them, or other livestock. And over 4 million tons of greenhouse gas has been dumped into our atmosphere by livestock. Therefore, I'm advocating a different approach than what Mark Bittman and the United Nations and others suggest when they state we should eat less meat. Well, because with that approach of eating less meat, only 7 million animals will be slaughtered in the next hour, and only 113,000 tons of grain will be wasted, leaving only 683 children in the world that will starve to death in that next 1 hour. Isn't that what less means? So unlike Jamie Oliver or Mark Bittman or Michael Pollan and all those other, really everybody in the world, all those other eat less meat advocates and food gurus, I think these numbers should be 0. I sure do. And it's easily attainable. There's no magic involved. Nothing has to be invented. No new technologies have to be employed. It's simply with what we all choose to eat. And now we're going to take a very quick look at the food service section of the policy of sustainability for the entire University of California system. Why? Why do you want to do that? Because it's a perfect example, I think, how efforts of well-intentioned individuals and institutions that are supposed to be the pinnacle of education can be so far very out of alignment with reality because of the definitions they're using. So you tell me, is this policy sustainable? What about the items I just highlighted in orange? Are those sustainable? That's what they think. Where does this policy fit in terms of relative sustainability? What about the primary objective of 20% by the year 2020? Who thought of that? Somebody named 20? Or are these merely baby steps that happen to affect 500,000 students and faculty and staff and millions of animals and our planet? And it's not much better with campuses on the east side of our country, is it? I took this right off the Dining Services website at Harvard's School of Public Health. Really? And close to home here, it appears that there's strong use of the word sustainable in higher education. Both these universities committed to being a leader in sustainability. This is a summary of initiatives in place at both these two universities at the same time. It's good to see, but wait, something's missing. There's obvious omission of food choice, specifically the effects of animal agriculture, except the old standby, the catch-all, that's easy for everybody to talk about, eating local, which slides into most conversations and grossly misses the mark. And this sums up the efforts of Marquette University quite well, I think, as they point out to their students that 8 gallons of water can be saved per person by turning the water off while you brush your teeth. That's a little steep, but hey, another 2 gallons of water could be saved just by reducing your shower by 1 minute each day. That's a good start. Those are good things. Saving 2 minutes, 2 gallons of water per day. But what Marquette should be teaching their students is that by cutting out all animal products from their diet, instead of 8 gallons of water, each person could save over 100 times that much water each day let alone all the other aspects of global depletion. So in terms of sustainability, this is what they need to be teaching their students. Then they really could be the difference rather than avoiding the issue and being part of the problem. So even at these prestigious universities, West Coast, East Coast, and here in the Midwest, they could certainly benefit from understanding and adopting a more accurate view of sustainability and then translating it to their students, our future leaders, and to do it now. And one more important, very important definition that needs refinement: ethics. The ethical consideration of what we choose to eat. The topic of conscious eating has always been about animal rights and animal welfare, hasn't it, Sherry? Very noble topic. The life and death of other living beings that we consume, how they're treated. Ethics has always been about this. But it's time to view conscious eating, or ethics, in a much different and certainly a much larger context. Is it ethical, for instance, for any of us to eat food that causes the extinction of other species if we don't need to? Is it ethical for the vast majority of humans on Earth to cause or contribute heavily to irreversible climate change, loss of ecosystems, and resource depletion, while 2% of us are living our lives through our food choices to protect Earth? Is it ethical for any of us to use our planet in a way that exacerbates world hunger and extracts the potential for future generations to survive? Is it even ethical for 313 million Americans to essentially impose their diet-related healthcare costs on the 5 million who choose to eat the right foods? So you see, it's time we rethink ethics. It needs to be framed much differently than just with animal rights. In fact, one of the chapters in my new book is titled, "Why Should I Pay for What Everyone Else Decides to Eat?" And it's pretty true. All right, well, it's time that I get to ask you a couple of questions. How many of you here in the audience own or operate or otherwise live on a dairy farm, or have relatives that do? Oh, this is Wisconsin. Come on now. Raise your hands. I'm raising my hand. There you go. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm very glad you're here. So you get to be the very first people that ask me questions at the end of the presentation, okay? Now, whether you live on a dairy farm or have anything to do with a dairy farm or not, how many here drink milk or consume dairy products? You know, cheese, yogurt, ice cream. Sure, there you go. We have more honest people. That's great. We all do, right? Sure. Now, why do you eat these things? Why do you drink milk and eat cheese and yogurt and ice cream? Well, aside from the taste, I guess, you've acquired some taste somewhere along the way. There are generally two reasons that we drink milk. Two primary reasons, general reasons, categorical reasons. The first reason is because dairy products are supposed to be healthy for us. That's the first reason. Why would you do it otherwise? Milk has calcium, builds strong bones, strong bodies. That's what we think. That's what we've been told. So we're going to spend 60 seconds or so looking at some hard facts about that. Milk and dairy, in addition to other animal products, actually build weak bones and weak bodies, not strong ones. Dairy products increase your risk of bone fracture. And they drop, along with other animal products, drop your immune response. They're upregulators of inflammation. They cause inflammation. The two countries in the world with the highest per capita rate of hip fracture due to osteoporosis or weak bones are Switzerland and the US, who also have the highest amount of milk consumption, versus, say, a country like Nigeria, who eat very little animal products, almost no dairy, and they have the lowest amount of bone fractures in the world. Why don't we know this? Think that's important? Well, it's because the meat and dairy industries are economically driven, aren't they? Sure they are. They're businesses. They're not health driven. They're not educational driven. They don't want you to know this. Milk and dairy products also increase your risk, as well as other animal products, of contracting various types of cancer. Prostate, breast, ovarian. Yes, they do. And milk and dairy products increase your risk of many other diseases, as does animal products. Heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, stroke, weight gain, allergies, congestion, Parkinson's disease. And milk contains numerous contaminants, hormones, pathogens, whether it's produced organically, grass-fed, local or not. Now, if that weren't enough, just put that aside. Pretend I didn't even say that, okay? 75% of the entire world population, 75% of everybody in the world are lactose intolerant. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Meaning our bodies aren't even really designed to digest milk. You know, there are nearly 5,000 just under 5,000 different types of mammals on Earth, all of which, by definition, produce milk for their own young. We humans are the only species on our planet to drink milk after we've been weaned. I guess you could say we're a bunch of toddlers, right? With diapers on. and we're the only species of the 5,000 on our planet to drink milk from a completely different species mother. I mean, if you really look at that carefully, it's, or not so carefully, it's just a bit bizarre. So you see, milk and dairy products aren't so good for us. They're not so good for our human health, but many people just don't want to believe this. In fact, I see a number of people in the audience doing this. Tell him to stop right now. Get him out of here. I don't want him to come back. All right. So for you who don't want to hear this, it's true. But for you who don't want to hear this, this becomes a very debatable topic, doesn't it? Yeah, because you don't want to hear it. It goes in here, it goes out there. So let's talk about something that isn't debatable at all, how unhealthy dairy products are for our environment. No debate. Producing milk or any animal product on a global basis is unsustainable. That's what I'm talking about tonight. It's absolutely terrible, disastrous for our planet. There's nothing to debate. It's the most resource-inefficient food item that we humans produce today, and here's why. One dairy cow, just one dairy cow, and whether you measure this on your own dairy farms or not, it's true. On average, eats between 120 to 150 pounds of food each day, drinks 30 to 40 gallons of water each day, in addition to the other 2,000 gallons of water tied up in its food each day. Do you ever measure that? And one cow produces 5 tons of greenhouse gases in 1 year and generates 27 tons of manure in 1 year, one single cow. Now multiply that out, please. Multiply that out over the 3.5 million cows you have here just in your state of Wisconsin on your 69,000 family farms, and you have a mess. Here's what that mess looks like across our country. In Wisconsin, did you know that 40% of all your inland lakes and 25% of your well water is considered contaminated with cyanotoxins? Go look it up. And pollutants from dairy operations. Livestock in our country produce 7 million pounds of feces and urine per minute. Anybody catch that? So you still doing this? I don't want to hear this. It's true. 7 million pounds every 60 seconds. Raising animals to eat and operating dairy farms in your state of Wisconsin creates as much untreated waste as 175 million people. That's 30 times more waste than what's produced by the entire human population in your state, and it's untreated. As I said, it's a mess. When it's all said and done, it took, on average, over 1,000 gallons of fresh, clean water to produce just 1 gallon of milk, required massive, inefficient land use for all the cows and crops to feed them, contributed heavily to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, created water and air pollution to then give us a product that's unhealthy for us to consume. And remember, if you didn't have your hands over your eyes when I showed you that, 75% of us humans can't even digest it. Now, along the way, there's unnecessary abuses, and I'm not here to talk about all those, but they're here. Whether you want to believe them or not, they exist. The production of veal and, of course, all the slaughtering, which is strongly defended by the industry. I understand why they do that. But we don't need to do it. And oh, please, don't forget about the 400,000 pigs, almost 500,000 pigs you're raising here in Wisconsin, that are factually smarter and more sensitive than most of the dogs and cats that we all have at home. I know this. I know this from experience. And we can't leave them out of discussions, or the turkeys or chickens. So to me, it makes, looking at this for 40 years now, and in many countries in the world, it makes little sense to continue doing what our great-grandparents did in the late 1800s and early 1900s when we didn't know any better. And there are far less mouths to feed and more land and water to do so. Do any of you still use typewriters? Still use typewriters? How about a feather quill pen? Do you use a feather quill pen? I bet you I got you there. To create your messages? All right, well, do you guys tweet with your typewriters? Huh? There you go. No, of course not. How about the Pony Express? Or the Stagecoach to send those messages or to travel? You think our internet's slow. Well, your great-grandparents did. And what about candles or kerosene lamps to read with at night or study by? Anybody out there use those? Well, why not? Why don't you use these things? I'll tell you why you don't use these things that we just talked about. It's because they're obsolete. That's why we've outgrown them. They're inefficient. They don't fit. And so it is, really, with all dairy and other animal products. The world on a global basis can no longer support the production of these things. Just like the typewriter just like the Pony Express. We need to evolve past them, and we need to do it today. The clock is ticking. And yes, I'm very familiar with the economic implications of the meat, dairy, and fishing industries. I know quite well about them. What are we going to do about all the jobs? And there's some great solutions to transition your farms to healthier, more sustainable operations, just like the stagecoach, just like the typewriter. For instance, did you know that you're also number one in the country for producing ginseng, and for producing cranberries, and for producing snap beans, all healthy products? I mean, you could all be running around with really nice cranberry mustaches on above your lips. You don't have to have milk there. you don't have to be number 1, 2, or 3 in our country for creating livestock waste, which you are. So that leaves only one other reason. Remember I said there were 2 reasons a few minutes ago? There's only one other reason that you'd want to drink milk or eat cheese. There is another reason, which is because someone told you to, like one of these guys. Yeah, well, I mean, if Taylor does it, I got to get on the stick. It's true. Or perhaps one of these guys influenced you. I can see why. Time to root for the Packers. I do. That's great. It's wonderful. And eat some cheese. Or your mother or father or grandparents influenced you. That's the very same reason I drank milk until I knew better. And I guess you could say that technically I still do drink milk. Yeah, I do. There's no question about it. I have a problem with that. I still drink milk. Yeah, there's no question. But it's this type of milk. It's healthy. It's sustainable. It's delicious. And it's certainly compassionate. So behind the scenes, the reality of our food choices is very well covered up by clever marketing campaigns, relentless clever marketing campaigns. After 20 years, this message has now been replaced by this one. More cover-up to be looking for. And if you really want to capture the truth about food choices, you go behind the scenes, you really want to tell everybody in the world about it, say on video, great idea. You want to spread the reality? Well, you might find yourself in jail. We don't want to know the reality, do we? We don't want to know truth. Newly passed ag-gag legislation. That seems right. That seems appropriate. Almost everything we do, every decision we make, every day, is based on our culture, isn't it? What we've learned, what someone else has told us to be acceptable or necessary. After realizing that bloodletting here wasn't so healthy for us after all, we miraculously stopped, even though we had been doing it for more than 3,000 years. There are culturally driven practices we are accepting today, especially with food choices involving all animal products, that are much more unhealthy for our planet and for us than bloodletting. And by all counts, we don't have 3,000 years to get it right. A number of organizations and governments are quite concerned about how we're going to feed the 9.6 billion people expected to inhabit Earth, that's right, by the year 2050. Because global demand for food, including meat and dairy products, will nearly double what it is today. So they put together a high-level expert forum. They're trying to scramble around to explore solutions, this being one of their solutions. You know what? They're absolutely right. That's what I'm going to be talking about in an international forum in a few weeks. They're absolutely right. Livestock does hold great importance. The quicker we can get rid of animal agriculture, the more secure food will be. There's no question about it. Although we ate 1.5 pounds less beef last year per capita, our country still produced, meaning we raised, slaughtered, and packaged over 2 billion pounds of beef in 1 year. The demand to raise, slaughter, extract, and eat animals is hardly believable. I mean, last year, especially in lieu of everything I'm talking about, last year the one-year figures look like this. So what exactly does the phrase eating less meat mean here? I mean, we're going to eat 1 million tons less of poultry? And if we really try to make a change in someone's diet, I mean, we really try to help them out. We're going to take something away from them. We're going to do that, okay? Look what happens. I feel that way sometimes. It's so true. But we're not doomed. We're not doomed yet. At this stage, one would have to ask, what are all the conservation groups doing about this problem? The ones we all give our money to. Are they telling their 40 million members to stop eating animal products? Certainly these groups must know about the global depletion food choice connection, and they're doing something about it. Right? No. The answer is no. They're not. All of these groups are very concerned about climate change. No problem there. But none of them, not one of them, has made a statement about the profound effect eating animals has on our environment, despite the fact that it does. And despite the fact that we've entrusted these groups to preserve and protect our planet, where's all of our donated money going? Well, there's a superb documentary about this very problem that will be released quite soon. So please check back on my website or Facebook page or Twitter for updates. Now, aside from those conservation groups who are very much in the dark, there are a few researchers and organizations that are quite aware of the dire predicament that we're in and the very short timelines that we're faced with. Any of these folks will bluntly tell you that our species, meaning humans, we are in a state of unsustainability and we can't remain on this course for very much longer. I'm not the only one. But not one of them is connecting that final dot. They continue telling us that our survival is in peril and that we need to change. But change what? And they make it very clear that we should stop over-consuming and overproducing, but over-consuming and overproducing what? Again, fossil fuels and waste are very easy targets for them to point their fingers at. There's a serious failure by these experts, all tremendous researchers, but they just can't get themselves around to recommending that final move to a fully plant-based diet. Why aren't we getting the truth from those with platforms, those who are guiding us? Well, it's because of three reasons. First, many are comfortably unaware, like many of those conservation groups. For those who are partially aware, such as those researchers, they simply can't get themselves around or bringing themselves around to make the right statement because they themselves consume animals. After all, how can we expect one of our leaders to guide us toward health and restoration of our planet if they can't even do it for themselves? And lastly, very importantly, many of our leaders are afraid. They're afraid, that's right. They're afraid they're going to lose their audience. They're very afraid of the powerful meat, dairy, and fishing industries. They're afraid to do the right thing while we slowly sink until it becomes too late. We're only here on Earth for what could be considered a fleeting moment of time. And yet we can do this much damage to ourselves, to our planet, to future generations because of the choices we make. Ask yourself and those around you this simple question on a daily basis. Is the food we're about to eat in the best interest of all living things? Regarding sustainability then, please picture 2 points in time and space. Point A is where we currently are as a global community. Point B is where we need to go, the point of true sustainability. Now, we're very far away from point B, and there's a vast sea of challenges between the two. Most businesses, individuals, organizations, policymakers in the world are getting on board a very large, powerful ship at point A, trying to get to sustainability, but their navigators don't know how to get to point B. They don't know how to get to point B. Their compasses and GPS systems are broken, which is very dangerous because all those on this large ship think they're going to make it to point B, but they won't. They're floating further and further away from it in a zone that I call pseudo-sustainability. That's where we're all going. Worse, there's a narrowing timeline before point B will be too far away and they'll never make it. Now, a few of us sitting on the dock at point A can clearly see point B. We know how to get there rather easily. I could just jump in the water and swim there. But here's the kicker. We can't get there by ourselves. Getting to the point of true sustainability, or point B, is a collective effort. We have to move the critical mass, taking all those on that other large ship with us. We need to travel together and quickly enough, or none of us are going to make it. That's the way sustainability on our planet is. Therefore, our leaders, those steering that large, powerful ship with most of the world on it, our leaders need a new navigation system. Now, some argue that it's unrealistic to ask the global population to eliminate meat, dairy, and fish. Not only as a functional change, but behavior psychologists would suggest that we not even use words such as eliminate or stop or don't when advocating change in food choice or any type of change, because that's too negative. It creates barriers, such as feeling of infringement of individual rights. So instead, many suggest to use the approach of kindly asking everyone to please begin replacing, or could you please begin substituting, maybe once in a while, animal products with a few plant-based alternatives, because you shouldn't tell anyone that they may have something taken away, or to stop an unhealthy habit, even though it's adversely affecting them and everything and everyone around them. But don't infringe on someone's individual rights. Really, is that so? Just where would you use the words please replace, or could you kindly substitute here? It's time to switch out, really, whose rights we're worried about. Knowing everything I've talked about today, there's certainly ample reason for feeling quite discouraged, isn't there? Anyone feeling discouraged out there? Yeah, I understand. Regarding loss of our planet's life systems, what we've done to our planet factually, there's so much bad news around us. And even with increased awareness, it seems we'll be constantly fighting an uphill battle. But in the midst of potential despair, there can be found great news. The nuclear warhead doesn't have to go off. We can spread the word and we can defuse it. There's an easy solution to global depletion. We don't have to destroy our planet or ourselves to eat. In fact, it's the other way around. But we must change. And it is a choice. We need to eliminate, substitute, replace the practice of raising, slaughtering, extracting, consuming animals. It must be comprehensive in scope. And we must do it now if we want to save lives, including our own. There's great news in all this, really, because the food choices that are optimal for our planet's health happen to be the very same food choices that optimize our own health. You know what? We could all be heroes. That's right. All of us. We could even be superheroes. Swooping down and saving lives and saving our planet with every single thing we eat every single day. A superhero. Yeah, I'm feeling better already. You know, something quite telling happened at the end of the annual Global Climate Change Conference that we talked about earlier. In her closing remarks, the executive secretary of the conference, Christiana Figueres, provided a summary of the conclusions of 200 nations, NGOs, and researchers by stating this about our future, about greenhouse gas emissions, and about climate change. She said this: "The science is unquestionable. Therefore, despite the obvious effects on the industry itself, we must call for the elimination of the use of coal as an energy source, and we must do this immediately." Now, notice that she didn't say that we should use less coal, or for us to use only local or humane coal. I'm pretty sure I didn't hear her say that. And I also didn't hear her say that we should all go coal-less on Mondays. In fact, she said we should eliminate coal, even though coal carries with it only a fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions that raising livestock does. And coal has no real direct effect on water scarcity, world hunger, loss of biodiversity, and all other areas of global depletion, but raising and eating animals does. So, the door has been opened, hasn't it? Perhaps inadvertently by Ms. Figueres and 200 nations. But as far as I'm concerned, the global stage for massive food choice change has been set. If there is an imminent threat to our planet and to us, which there is, well, we should certainly be able to call for its elimination and for it to be done immediately. So I encourage and challenge everyone to become more aware about your food choices. Seek more accurate definitions. Understand and appreciate the timelines and the ticking cancerous bomb that we're faced with. And then let's all commit to making a difference. But not just with our own health or our own life. No, let's commit to making a difference in someone else's life. And let's commit to making a difference in the long-term health of our planet. But let's do it now, not later. We might not have a later. Now let's think about making a difference every single day of the week, not just on Mondays. Be the compass. Be the superhero for those around you, guiding them and the ship they're on to point B before that door closes. That, my friends, is what sustainability and positive change to achieve it is really all about. With that in mind, let's all of us here today in this room, let's all of us go out and inspire others to become aware. Thank you so very much. You're really a tremendous audience, and really, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Real privilege.